Welcome back to Coin's Numismatic series, where we uncover the history, secrets, varieties, errors, and surprising values hiding inside America's most fascinating coins. In this episode, we are examining three wheat pennies that every collector should know: the 1951, the 1952, and the 1953. We will look beyond the date and denomination to uncover their historical background, physical design, mintage, production characteristics, known varieties and errors, market values, and the details that can turn an ordinary 1-cent coin into a serious collectible. So grab your magnifying glass, check that old penny collection, and let's find out what makes these three early 1950s wheat cents worth a much closer look. 1951 Wheat Penny 1-cent coin. The 1951 Lincoln Wheat Penny is a fascinating coin because it comes from the final decade of the famous wheat cent series, yet it was produced at a time when the design was already deeply established in American life. The Lincoln cent had first appeared in 1909, created from the work of sculptor Victor David Brenner. Its introduction was historically significant because Lincoln became the first real person to appear on a regular United States circulating coin. The original reverse featured two wheat ears surrounding the central inscriptions, a design that would remain in use until 1958. By 1951, that design was already more than 40 years old. America was entering the post-World War II era, but the Korean War had begun in 1950, creating renewed demand for industrial production and circulating coinage. The United States economy was expanding, consumer spending was changing, and millions of Americans were using the humble Lincoln cent in everyday transactions. Every 1951 wheat penny therefore represents a tiny piece of this period of American history. The standard 1951 Philadelphia Lincoln cent has no mint mark. This is an important point for beginning collectors. When you see a 1951 wheat penny without a letter beneath the date, that does not mean the mint mark was accidentally left off. It means the coin was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, where cents of this era normally carried no mint mark. The Philadelphia issue had a mintage of 284,576,000 coins. That is a substantial number, but it is considerably lower than the Denver and San Francisco issues from the same year. The Denver Mint produced 625,355,1951 D cents, while San Francisco produced 136,010,1951 S cents. The coin itself has the traditional specifications of the period. It measures approximately 19 millimeters in diameter and weighs about 3.11 grams. Its composition is 95% copper with the remaining 5% consisting primarily of tin and zinc. The edge is plain. These details are more than technical information because they help establish what an authentic example should physically look and feel like. On the obverse, Lincoln faces right. Above his portrait is the inscription, "I in God we trust." Liberty appears to the left of Lincoln, and the date 1951 is positioned in front of his portrait. The portrait contains numerous fine details that can help determine the quality of the strike and the amount of circulation the coin experienced. Lincoln's hair, cheek, jaw, coat, and the surrounding field should all be examined for wear, marks, scratches, and evidence of cleaning. The reverse is where the coin gets its famous wheat penny nickname. Two wheat stalks frame the inscriptions United States of America, 1 cent, and E pluribus unum. The wheat design was an appropriate symbol for an agricultural nation and gave the coin a very distinctive appearance. Even today, collectors can often identify a wheat cent instantly just by seeing those two wheat ears. One of the most important factors when determining the value of a 1951 Philadelphia wheat penny is condition. A worn example that has spent decades circulating is generally a relatively inexpensive collectible. But the market changes dramatically when you move into high mint state grades. PCGS describes the 1951 Philadelphia issue as very common through approximately MS65, while MS66 becomes considerably scarcer and MS67 or higher is very scarce. This is where the concept of condition rarity becomes extremely important. More than 284 million coins were originally struck, but very few were preserved perfectly. Most entered circulation, developed scratches, accumulated contact marks, lost their original luster, or changed color through oxidation and environmental exposure. A collector searching for a superb example, therefore, isn't simply looking for a surviving 1951 penny. They are looking for one that survived exceptionally well. Copper color is another major factor. Collectors and grading services generally classify Lincoln copper cents as brown, red-brown, or red. Brown examples have undergone substantial natural color change. Red-brown examples retain some original copper color, while red examples preserve much more of the original reddish appearance from the time of striking. When the grade is high, the difference in color designation can have a major effect on desirability and price. PCGS records an auction result of $10,350 for a 1951 Philadelphia wheat cent graded MS-67, sold by Heritage Auctions in 2006. That result is an excellent demonstration of how a common date can become extraordinarily valuable at the highest levels of preservation. It does not mean an ordinary 1951 penny is worth thousands of dollars. Instead, it shows that elite-grade examples can be condition rarities even when the overall date is common. The 1951 Philadelphia cent also has an important double die history. Wexler's reference material identifies a 1951 proof double die obverse variety, designated W001, described as showing a strong Class II spread toward the center on the letters of "In God We Trust," with additional doubling in the date, upper hair details, and Lincoln's eyelet. This is particularly interesting because it demonstrates that variety collecting isn't limited to famous dates. Specialists study tiny differences created during die production and use those characteristics to identify specific varieties. There is also an important distinction between the Philadelphia in 1951 and the 1951 D. The Denver issue has documented double die, over mintmark, and repunched mintmark varieties. PCGS lists varieties including the 1951 DDDOFS 101, 1951 D/S over mintmark FS 511, 1951 D over mintmark FS 512, and 1951 D/D repunched mintmark FS 521. For someone examining a normal 1951 Philadelphia penny, however, the most important approach is not to assume every unusual-looking mark is an error. Genuine double dies are created during the die-making process and usually produce recognizable, raised secondary design details. Machine doubling can look similar, but normally has a different appearance. Scratches, dents, die deterioration, and post-mint damage can also create false impressions. The market value of a circulated 1951 Philadelphia wheat penny is generally modest because the date is not considered a major rarity. The real opportunities begin with superior preservation, attractive original color, recognized varieties, and exceptional certified grades. PCGS records an auction record of $1,265 for a brown example, although the much more spectacular $10,350 result demonstrates how dramatically prices can vary depending on grade and circumstances. For collectors, the 1951 is an excellent date to study because it teaches one of the most important lessons in numismatics. Mintage alone does not determine value. You have to consider survival, grade, color, strike, surface quality, variety, and demand. When examining one yourself, start with the date. Then confirm that it has no mint mark if you are looking at the Philadelphia issue. Check Lincoln's portrait for wear and contact marks. Examine the fields for scratches and cleaning. Look at the wheat ears for sharpness and detail. Then study the coin under magnification for possible die varieties. Most importantly, never clean the coin. A naturally toned wheat cent with original surfaces is generally far more desirable than a coin that has been polished or chemically treated. That combination of history, affordability, and the possibility of condition rarity makes the 1951 Lincoln wheat penny a fascinating addition to any collection. It may have been produced in the hundreds of millions, but the very finest survivors tell a completely different story. They represent the difference between a coin that simply survived and a coin that survived exceptionally well. 1952 Wheat Penny 1 cent coin. The 1952 Lincoln Wheat Penny takes us 1 year deeper into the early 1950s, and it is a particularly interesting date because Philadelphia's production was substantially lower than the previous year. The standard 1952 Philadelphia Lincoln cent had a mintage of 186,775,000 pieces. Denver produced an enormous 746,130,000 cents, while San Francisco produced 137,800,004. Proof production at Philadelphia reached 81,980 pieces. That production history immediately makes the 1952 Philadelphia issue worth studying. With fewer than 200 million circulation strikes produced at Philadelphia, it is not one of the enormous production dates of the Wheat Cent series. Yet it is still readily collectible because a substantial number survived. The 1952 cent has the same fundamental physical characteristics as the 1951. It measures 19 millimeters, weighs approximately 3.11 grams, has a plain edge, and uses the traditional 95% copper, 5% tin and zinc composition. The obverse presents Lincoln facing right, with "I in God we trust" above him, Liberty to his left, and the date 1952 in front of his portrait. Since this is the Philadelphia issue, there is no mint mark. That absence is intentional and should not be confused with a missing mint mark error. The reverse continues the wheat design that collectors have loved for generations. The wheat ears extend vertically along both sides of the reverse, framing United States of America, 1 cent, and E pluribus unum. The design is relatively simple compared with many later American coins, but that simplicity is one of its greatest strengths. It makes the wheat penny instantly recognizable and gives the series a strong visual identity. The history behind the 1952 penny is also compelling. The United States was still involved in the Korean War, and the Cold War was shaping American politics and international relations. Dwight D. Eisenhower would win the presidential election later that year, while the American economy was experiencing the pressures and opportunities of the post-war period. A 1952 Lincoln cent therefore comes from a fascinating transition point in American history. Now let's talk about value. A circulated 1952 Philadelphia wheat penny is generally affordable, and its value is primarily driven by condition rather than simple age. However, the upper end of the market tells a much more dramatic story. PCGS lists an auction record of $9,775 for a 1952 Philadelphia Lincoln cent graded MS-67, sold in 2007. That figure is important because it demonstrates the enormous difference between a common circulated collectible and a top-quality condition rarity. A coin might have originally been worth only 1 cent, and millions of similar coins may still exist. But if extremely few survive at the highest grade, competitive collectors can pay substantial premiums. The color designation is critical here as well. A brown coin may be significantly less valuable than a comparable red-brown or red specimen. Copper naturally changes color as it is exposed to air and other environmental conditions. Collectors prize original red color because it indicates that the coin retained much of the appearance it had shortly after being struck. But original color alone isn't enough. A red coin covered with carbon spots, scratches, stains, or contact marks may not command a strong premium. The finest coins combine color with sharp strike, attractive luster, clean fields, and minimal distractions. The 1952 Philadelphia issue also has documented die varieties and proof varieties. One particularly important part of the 1952 story is the existence of proof coins. The Philadelphia Mint struck 81,980 proofs in 1952, and proof examples were produced specifically for collectors rather than normal circulation. This gives collectors another way to approach the date. A normal circulation strike 1952 has a different production purpose from a proof. Proof coins were struck with special preparation and handling designed to create sharper detail and more reflective surfaces. Consequently, a genuine 1952 proof should not be confused with an unusually shiny business strike. The 1952 D is particularly important for error and variety collectors. PCGS documents a 1952 D over Mintmark category and specifically identifies the 1952 D/S OMMFS 511 variety. In this case, evidence of an underlying S can be seen beneath the final D mint mark. That variety exists because of historical minting practices. During this period, mint marks were punched individually into working dies. If a die needed to be repurposed or corrected, a different mint mark could be punched over an existing one. The result could leave traces of the original letter beneath the final mint mark. This is precisely the kind of detail that makes variety hunting so rewarding. To someone unfamiliar with numismatics, the mint mark may simply look like a tiny D. To a specialist with magnification and reference photographs, it can contain evidence of the manufacturing process. PCGS records an auction result of $650 for a 1952 D/S OMIM-FS 511 graded MS66 red, demonstrating that a recognized variety can bring a significant premium even when the basic date is common. The standard 1952 D also shows how much condition can influence value. PCGS records an auction result of $3,840 for an MS67 Plus red example in 2023. Another certified 1952 DMS66 red example carried a PCGS price guide value of $30 in the certification database, illustrating just how wide the market can be between high-grade but relatively common pieces and the finest survivors. For the collector holding a 1952 without a mint mark, the best strategy is to concentrate on condition, color, surfaces, and possible varieties. Look closely at the date and lettering for legitimate doubling. Examine the reverse for die cracks and chips, but remember that ordinary die wear is not automatically a valuable error. You should also inspect the coin for signs of cleaning. A bright orange or unnaturally shiny copper cent may have been polished, dipped, or otherwise altered. Professional collectors generally prefer originality. If a coin has been cleaned, that can substantially reduce its desirability regardless of how bright it looks. The 1952 wheat penny is therefore a perfect example of the complexity of coin values. Its mintage is important, but mintage is only the starting point. The true question is how many survive in each condition and how many possess the qualities collectors want. For a beginning collector, a worn 1952 is a wonderful historical collectible. For a more advanced collector, a sharply struck red example becomes much more interesting. For a variety specialist, the search can move toward documented doubled dies, proof varieties, and related mint mark varieties. And for a registry set collector, the challenge can become finding one of the finest certified survivors. That is the beauty of the 1952. It offers something to almost every level of collector. It is accessible enough for beginners, but it contains enough complexity to keep advanced specialists searching. 1953 wheat penny 1-cent coin. Now we arrive at the 1953 Lincoln wheat penny, another important early 1950s issue, and one that has an especially interesting story when we look beyond the ordinary circulated coin. The Philadelphia circulation strike had a mintage of 256,755,000 pieces. Denver produced 700,515,000, while San Francisco produced 181,835,000. Philadelphia also struck 128,800 proof cents. The 1953 issue therefore belongs to a period of extremely heavy Lincoln cent production. More than 250 million Philadelphia circulation strikes were made, and the Denver and San Francisco mints added hundreds of millions more. On the surface, that sounds like a recipe for an inexpensive coin. But once again, numismatics is rarely that simple. The 1953 Lincoln cent follows the established wheat penny design. Victor David Brenner's portrait of Lincoln dominates the obverse, with "I in God we trust" above, "Liberty" to the left, and the date 1953 in front of Lincoln's portrait. A Philadelphia example has no mint mark. The reverse contains the two wheat ears surrounding United States of America, 1 cent, and E pluribus unum. By 1953, the wheat reverse was nearing the final years of its long production run. The design would continue through 1958, after which the Lincoln Memorial reverse would replace it in 1959. The physical specifications remain consistent with the earlier dates. The coin is approximately 19 millimeters in diameter, weighs about 3.11 grams, has a plain edge, and consists of 95% copper with tin and zinc making up most of the remainder. For the ordinary circulated 1953 Philadelphia penny, the value is generally modest. But the coin becomes much more interesting in mint state. PCGS estimates approximately 25.6 million surviving examples across all grades, but estimates only about 5,000 at MS60 or better, and roughly 2,500 at MS65 or better in the particular brown analysis shown in its Coinfax data. PCGS also describes the 1953 Philadelphia cent as particularly difficult in MS66 or higher. This is a powerful example of why collectors cannot simply look at the original mintage. More than 256 million coins were produced, but very few remain in truly elite condition. PCGS notes that MS66 red examples number only in the hundreds, while MS67 red examples are exceptionally rare. The auction record for a brown 1953 Philadelphia cent listed by PCGS is $1,495 for an MS60 example sold by Heritage Auctions. Again, this should not be interpreted as the normal value of an ordinary 1953 penny. Auction records represent particular coins, grades, colors, and circumstances. They are useful because they show what exceptional examples have achieved, not because every coin of that date has the same value. The real excitement begins with the 1953 proof issue. Philadelphia struck only 128,800 proof cents that year. These coins were manufactured specifically for collectors and can display much sharper detail and specially prepared surfaces compared with ordinary circulation strikes. Proof coins can carry red, cameo, and deep cameo designations depending on their surface contrast and preservation. PCGS records an auction result of $10,869 for a 1953 proof graded PR 67 deep cameo, sold in 2021. That is an extraordinary result for a 1-cent coin and demonstrates just how valuable elite proof preservation can become. PCGS also records a $7,475 auction result for a 1953 proof graded PR 69 red. These results show that the proof version can occupy a completely different section of the market from the ordinary circulation strike. PCGS records an auction result of $1,116 for a 1953 proof DDoFS 101 graded PR 67 deep cameo, while another listing for the same variety in red proof format shows an auction result of $1,880 at PR 68. These figures demonstrate that recognized varieties can add another layer of collector demand on top of grade and proof quality. The 1953 D is also worth remembering. PCGS records a mintage of 700,515,000 and documents several repunched Mintmark varieties, including FS 501 and FS 502. An auction record of $7,475 exists for a high-grade 1953 D-red example at MS67, showing once again that enormous production does not prevent the finest survivors from becoming valuable. When examining a 1953 wheat penny, collectors should therefore approach it from several directions. First, identify whether it is a Philadelphia, Denver, or San Francisco issue. Then determine whether it is a circulation strike or proof. Next, evaluate the color. After that, inspect the strike and surfaces. For an uncirculated piece, pay particular attention to carbon spots. Copper coins can develop dark spots that are distracting and difficult to remove without damaging the surface. A coin with beautiful original color but several prominent spots may be substantially less desirable than a cleaner example of the same grade. Also examine Lincoln's portrait carefully. Look at the hair, forehead, eye, cheek, jaw, and coat. Then inspect the date and lettering. On the reverse, study the wheat ears and central lettering. A strong strike with sharp detail is desirable. And if you believe you have discovered an error, don't immediately assume it is valuable. A genuine mint error or recognized die variety needs to be distinguished from post-mint damage, machine doubling, scratches, corrosion, and die deterioration. The safest approach is to compare the coin against established references and, when the potential value justifies it, seek professional attribution. That makes the 1953 Lincoln wheat penny far more interesting than its mintage might initially suggest. The coin was made in huge quantities, but exceptional survivors are another matter entirely. The combination of copper composition, color preservation, grade, strike quality, proof status, and recognized varieties creates a wide spectrum of collector interest. And when we step back and compare the 1951, 1952, and 1953, a fascinating pattern emerges. All three belong to the same historic wheat cent design. All three were struck during an important period in American history. All three were produced in substantial numbers. Yet none should be judged by mintage alone. The 1951 teaches us the importance of condition rarity and the potential of high-grade survivors. The 1952 introduces us to lower Philadelphia production and the fascinating world of proof and mintmark varieties, especially the important 1952 D/S over mintmark. The 1953 brings us exceptional mint state rarity, a significant proof issue, and documented double die and re-engraved design varieties. So if you have any of these three dates sitting in an old coin jar, don't dismiss them because they look ordinary. Start with the date. Check the mint mark. Study the color. Examine the surfaces. Look for unusual doubling or recognized variety characteristics. And most importantly, protect the original surfaces by never cleaning or polishing the coin. Because this is what makes collecting wheat pennies so exciting. A coin that was born as a simple 1-cent piece can survive for more than 7 decades and eventually become a historical artifact, a condition rarity, a recognized variety, or a valuable auction piece.